This video is to show how to identify a Title 38 employee in VATAS and also some things you need to know when posting for these types of employees. So first I'm going to go to the timesheet profile just to show you what it will look like for your Title 38 RNs. Your premium pay indicator will show an A if that's applicable to your station. If not, it will just be blank. Your user type is going to show as Title 38. Your U.S. code indicator is also going to show as Title 38. And your type of appointment is always going to be either a 5 or a 6. Now if we come down here to the entitlement flags, you may notice that their night differential flag is showing as false, which is correct for this type of employee. And that is because they have their tour differential flag set to true. So what tour differential means is that these employees will get the night differential pay for the whole entire tour if 4 or more hours of continuous service fall between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. And I'll show you that a little bit more when we actually get to the timesheet itself. And then their Saturday and Sunday flags are set to true. These employees will get paid for all paid hours worked in a continuous period of service, any part of which is on a Saturday or Sunday. And again, I'll show that a little bit more when we get to the timesheet. So I'm going to go ahead and do select employees, and I'm going to go to the timesheet for this employee. And I'm going to go ahead and hit validate so we can see the errors. And then I'm going to go ahead and talk about some of these errors and why we are getting them. So on the first day, on January 22nd, we are getting a warning saying the night differential hours do not match the time worked between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. So in this scenario, this employee worked from 4 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. So they are entitled to the night differential from the 6 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. So we're going to give them 3.5 hours of night differential. Now for your Title 38 RNs, it doesn't matter whether the overtime is scheduled or unscheduled or callback. They are going to get night differential anytime they work those hours. So now we were able to go ahead and clear that warning. So now we'll go to the next warning on the 23rd. And so this employee was called back. So again, as I mentioned, they are still entitled to the night differential. They worked from 8 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. So I need to go ahead and give them their 30 minutes of night differential on that day. I'm going to go ahead and validate. And again, that will clear that warning. Now we're going to move on to this warning that's on the 26th. Now in this particular case, this employee actually worked starting at 7:30 in the morning on Friday as part of their tour. Then they worked overtime from 4 p.m. to 12 a.m. And that overtime actually continued all the way actually into Saturday. They actually worked a half an hour of overtime on Saturday. So in this particular case, this is where the tour differential falls into play. So they did work 4 or more hours between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. because they worked all the way till 12:30 a.m. So that's definitely 4 more hours. And usually, especially on a tour like this, anything that crosses up past 10 p.m. is going to fall into that continuous period of service. So in this case, in order to actually get rid of this warning, so there's a warning on this day, but you also notice there is also an actual error on this day as well. And it is talking about the tour differential on that day. So in this case, again, this employee is entitled to the whole entire tour being night differential. So I'm going to go ahead and put the 8 hours of night differential in there, and I'm going to validate. And so that not only got rid of the warning, it also got rid of the error that was talking about the tour differential. Now there is a warning here on the 30th and the 31st. Now on this day, this employee had a tour that started at 6 at night until 2:30 in the morning. And this employee actually took leave for this entire tour from 6 p.m. all the way until 2:30 a.m. the next day. So in this case, because this employee has hit 8 hours of leave, they are not entitled to the night differential on this day. And VATAS is giving you a warning. But if you actually tried to put night differential in there on this day, it's actually going to give you an error because this employee is not entitled to the night differential because they have 8 hours of leave on that day. Anytime they hit 8 hours of leave in a pay period, they are not entitled to night differential for those periods of leave. So I'm going to go ahead and take that off, and those warnings are just going to remain. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the weekend premium pay for this employee. So we are actually getting some errors on here. So let's look at the one that's on Sunday the 28th. So now on this day, this employee was called back into work on Sunday. And the timekeeper went in and they did the request for overtime callback, but this particular employee is entitled to weekend premiums anytime they work on the weekend. So this overtime request is actually in error, and VATAS is actually giving errors, basically letting you know that you have to utilize the Sunday hours, the Sunday codes for this. So the timekeeper is going to actually have to get this premium pay request reverted to pending, and they are going to actually have to use the Sunday callback overtime codes for this particular employee. Anytime your Title 38 employees work on the weekends, you're always going to want to select the overtime codes that include the weekend premiums on there. Now, there's one other thing that I wanted to point out for this when it comes to the continuous periods of service and the weekend premiums. So I'm going to go back to this Friday that we had already fixed the tour differential for. Now, again, as you remember, I had said that this employee worked the entire time from 7:30 at night all the way continuously that night into Saturday. And they worked half an hour on that Saturday. So this means this was a continuous period of service. There's not more than an hour break in there. So this means that this person is entitled to this whole entire tour being paid as weekend premium. So the timekeeper did select the correct codes. They did select the OW, the Saturday codes for this overtime, which was correct. But what also needs to happen for this particular employee is the timekeeper will need to go in and change this RG to Saturday worked. And that's because, again, this was a continuous period of service with a break of no more than an hour that extended into Saturday. So again, I'm just going to go ahead and validate this one. Now we can't fully validate this one because this code was incorrect for Sunday, so the timekeeper is still going to have to fix that before the timesheet will be fully validated for this employee. So now I'm going to move on to a part-time employee, so I can just show you a couple other things for these types of employees. So now for your part-time employee, I'm just going to go to the timesheet summary first, just so you can see the whole entire timesheet. And again, the same types of things are going to apply. These employees are entitled to the weekend premiums anytime they work on the weekends. They are entitled to the tour differential if 4 or more hours fall between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. for continuous service. Now, I also want to bring up on here for your part-time and your intermittent employees, overtime is anything that is over 8 hours of continuous service. It's not over 8 hours in a day. It's 8 hours of continuous service, or 40 hours in a week if they're not compressed, or 80 hours in a pay period. So on here, I just want to again point out a couple of these errors and why we were getting them. So on this Saturday, the timekeeper, when they did the add work time for this part-time employee, because notice they don't have a tour on Saturday, they just added it as RG. They did 3:30 to 12 as RG. So that actually needs to be Saturday worked. And it's also giving an error for the tour differential because, again, 4 or more hours fall between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. So this employee is entitled to the night differential for this whole entire tour. Now, we're also getting some errors for the overtime. So I did want to show you this. So on this day, this employee started working at 3:30, worked till midnight, and then worked continuously into the next day, for another 6 hours. So this is properly coded as overtime because it meets the over 8 continuous hours for overtime. So this is properly coded. Now the employee also did not have a schedule on the 1st, and the timekeeper went in and posted overtime from 8 to 4:30. Well, this is not meeting the overtime requirements. It's not over 8 continuous hours. It's not over 40 hours in this week. It's not over 80 hours in the pay period. So VATAS is actually giving an error saying daily or weekly hours must be met before an overtime entitlement exists. So if you're seeing this for your part-time employees, that means you need to have that premium pay request reverted back to pending. You need to delete it, and then you need to just post the time as RG. Now I'm going to show you an intermittent employee. This is pretty much going to be the same as your part-time employee, but I just wanted you to go ahead and see this. And again, I'm just going to go to the timesheet summary for this one. Again, the same types of things. You're going to see these errors for the weekend premium codes, and you're going to see the errors for the tour differential. So again, this employee worked on Sunday, starting at 8 at night to midnight, and then from midnight to 8. So again, you're getting an error because it's telling you that you need to have the weekend premium coded. So you need to go in there and change that to SG. And it's also giving you an error because it's saying that you need to have the tour differential on this day because, again, 4 or more hours are falling between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. Now, one other thing that I did want to point out on this particular employee is that VATAS is giving a warning for this day because, again, this person did work more than 8 continuous hours. So the timekeeper actually needs to change 4 hours of this day to overtime. So they need to post it as 12 a.m. to 4 a.m. RG to get it up to the 8 hours, and then the 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. would be overtime. So I'm just going to go ahead and into the timesheet just to show you that we can fix some of those errors as far as the changing it to the weekend premium. So this was that first Sunday where we had that 8 p.m. to 12 a.m. And again, we can just go in here and change it to Sunday, and we can also put the night differential in there. If we go ahead and validate that, that's going to get rid of some of our errors. And if we go into this day, again, we can fix the tour differential part of it and the Sunday part of it, but the timekeeper also actually needs to make that part of that overtime as well. But I just wanted to show you this to show you to clear the errors. And then there's one last one on this day on the 26th. And again, this falls into the tour differential, so we can go ahead and validate this one. Now, I just want you to notice, too, that I was able to validate this, even though it's still showing us this warning that's saying the overtime entitlement exists. So just be really careful when you're having the intermittent employees and making sure that if you're seeing this warning telling you that the overtime entitlement exists, to go ahead and make sure that you properly post that as overtime that this employee is entitled to. So just one last thing about your Title 38 employees. If you have any of them on crossover tours, you definitely want to watch the video for the Title 38 crossover tours so you learn how to properly set up the tours for your employees, your Title 38 RN employees that are on a crossover tour. So that is how you would identify your Title 38 employees and some things you need to know about posting them. And I thank you for joining me in this video.